A great meeting point, convenient light meals, hot and cold beverages, or a quick snack on the go. What's your order for the day? We don't just say, we do. It's the Stain City way.
Hello and welcome to Real Talk with myself, Anele Mdoda, on SABC 3, where the stage is yours. So early this week, we were looking at disciplining children in your home, but what about home-based education? You can be forgiven for being on holiday mode, festive gear and all of that, but soon enough, you'll be hit with the reality of back to school in the new year. So let's just start chatting about this now. When you think of your child's education, do you ever wonder beyond traditional government and private schooling? Nowadays, more and more parents seem to choose homeschooling over public school education, and there are some good reasons for this. Later on in the show, you'll hear from parents who have opted for home education, but right now, we know there was huge uproar on the proposed laws for homeschooling, some accusing the state of interference. So what is the legal status of home education, and should the state be involved? Whose responsibility is it to educate children, the state or the parents? And what are the rules and regulations should you decide to homeschool? Right now, I'm joined by the Department of Basic Education spokesperson, Troy Martens, and a home education mom and consultant, Joy Leavesley. Is it Leavesley?
Leavesley.
Leavesley. Did you hear enough tree jokes when you were growing up?
Sure, of course.
I can imagine. Okay, Troy, off the bat, what laws are you guys, when I say you guys, I'm talking about education, what are you guys suggesting?
So basically, we've introduced this draft policy on home education. It's out for public comment currently. And basically what it seeks to do is to regulate and recognize and monitor homeschooling. As you know, or home education as we call it. As you know, basic education is a right enshrined in our constitution. So if parents choose, as they are well within their rights to do so, the option of home education, this is really to ensure that they are in fact providing that education to those children. And it really puts the onus on the parent to ensure that the child is registered with the department. That's one of the things that this new policy requires, so that we are aware that there is a child and they are getting an education at home. It requires parents to enlist the services of an independent qualified assessor at the exit grades of each phase, so that's grade 3, 6 and 9. And this is so that as the department we're able to monitor if the child is receiving an education that is either on par or above that of the public schooling curriculum. So
prior to this, none of these were in place where the education's got a way of seeing what is being taught at home?
Not at all. So basically what would happen is parents would take their children out of school and the department would have no mechanisms to monitor them. We wouldn't know where these children were. What was happening is there were illegal types of private schools being set up under the guise of home education. So really what the home education policy seeks to do is to provide guidelines and regulations around home education. And that's really it.
Joy.
Yes.
Is this interference from the government?
So one of the issues is that you would have to apply to the head of department of your province. So if you were my daughter, I would need to write to them to say, I would like to homeschool you. Please, can I have your permission to do so? This is somebody who would never have met you, and in fact probably won't meet you before they agree, and has never met me. So on what grounds are they going to agree that it's a good idea or not a good idea?
But is every parent qualified to homeschool their child?
So it's my view that you are, and a lot of the research suggests that it actually doesn't matter how educated the parent is when it comes to the quality or the end product of homeschooling. It
doesn't matter how educated the parent is. How does that work out? Because, I mean, if you're going to be giving me an education, you should have just a roundabout idea of what's going on.
So I think that gets really to the heart of it, which is what is education and what is school. So in school you're taught you don't necessarily have to learn.
Okay.
Because you're going to be automatically passed anyway, aren't you?
At school?
At school. So
my maths mark begs to differ.
Well, the law is that you can only fail 1 year in each phase.
Okay.
So you would automatically pass anyway. So
is that true, Troy?
Okay, I'd like to clarify that. It's our policy on progression. So what happens is, in order to basically retain learners in education,
yes,
is that they are, if they fail more than once in a phase, in a particular
What's
phase.
A phase?
So grades 1 to 3 is
yes,
the foundation phase.
Yeah.
Grades 4 to 6 is a phase.
Okay, okay.
And
this is where you're wanting parents to come and
yes,
check in.
And check in at the end of each phase. So you can't fail more than once in a phase.
But
and
what if you're not?
So this is the thing. It's not that you just get pushed through.
Yeah.
It's that you need to get the requisite remedial support, because it's not clearly something's going wrong if a child repeatedly fails, for example, grade 4.
Yeah.
If you fail grade 4 3 times, there's a problem. You're not getting, either there's a learning problem or you're not getting taught properly.
Mm-hmm.
So this is really, you meant to get the remedial support and extra support. It's not a thing of just pushing you through. And this is why, for example, in grade 12, there's those progressed learners, and what we're finding is when we give them the extra support, so these are learners who technically failed grade 11 and have been able to go through to grade 12 with the extra support. And last year we found that some of these learners got distinctions, they got bachelor passes, university entrance, and these are learners that would have been disheartened and having failed consistently, maybe would have dropped out of school. We have a very big dropout rate, especially in that grade 10, the end of grade 10. And this is because what we're finding is a lot of schools were keeping learners who they didn't think would pass matric, keep them back repeatedly. But when they were given the chance, it actually found that, and it's a practice that is around the world. It's not, it's an internationally recognized best practice to progress learners and not keep them back in the same grade multiple times.
Okay, so Joy, your only issue with what's proposed is the fact that you have to register your child, but yes.
No, so it's the applying.
Yes.
So I don't mind saying to the government, my kids are at home and I'm teaching them.
Okay.
That's fine.
And you don't mind that they want another person to come and, what is it, assess the kids?
Assess.
Yes, so I do mind. Because what are you going to assess my children on?
Do you not want your kids to go to varsity?
So I do, and they will, in fact, probably go to varsity.
But then surely there should be a way for us to see if they are on par with the requirements that are needed to get into varsity.
So ultimately, of course, if you want to go to university, you're going to have to pass through a gate.
Yeah.
And that gate will be either a South African matric or a Cambridge or an international baccalaureate.
So they're gonna, when they write their matric exams, they don't write a paper that you set for them. They write...
No, they must write an internationally you know, accredited qualification at that point, absolutely. But how do we get there?
Okay,
you know, there are 1,000 ways, obviously, to get to the end.
So now your issue is just the fact that you have to ask for permission.
So I must ask for permission from somebody who doesn't know my children and what's best for them, more than a mother. You know, you've raised your children. No one knows more than you.
I think in the ideal world, you are a great mom and you're the perfect mom, but not every parent is like that. And I think that's what the...
a great proportion are.
Sorry?
A great proportion are.
You're living a very sheltered life then.
No, I'm talking about in terms of parents understanding their children. I think that predominantly the parent understands their child.
I think if I can come in here,
Yes.
the policy is not seeking to deny people access to or the option to homeschool. In fact, the policy explicitly says that this is a recognition that parents have the right to choose what kind of education they want for their children. But it also places a responsibility on the parents to provide, like, for example, in the Constitution, in the Children's Act, and in the SASA Act, the onus is on parents is to provide requisite care to those children. And that care also includes to ensure that they have the right to basic education. Now, I understand where Joy is coming from in terms of, you know, she's quite happy with her child to do the Cambridge exam or whichever other exam they can. And the home education policy is not prescriptive on what curriculum the parents can choose to follow, as long as they follow a curriculum that is either at the standard and quality of the public schooling or above that.
Okay.
So it's not prescriptive in any manner.
Can I jump in here? What criteria, because we need to go, what criteria are you using to check if the parents are, as you guys want to know, fit to be homeschooling their children?
I think that's something that will come in during the implementation phase. The policy doesn't speak to what that would be. So
I think that's the problem.
So at this point, it would be that parents would apply, and it really only speaks to withdrawing that, because I don't think the department is wanting to deny parents and I think that's what we need to clarify.
Okay, good.
We by no means want to deny people the opportunity to educate their children at home. Some of the main things that we're seeking to address in this is to ensure that learners are getting basic education and to ensure that illegal schools are not running under the guise. So if you want to be an independent school, then you need to register again with the department and operate as an independent school.
Okay.
So what was happening...
I must cut you off. But I pretty much get the gist of it, and I think we got it. Troy, thank you for your time. Joy, thank you for your time. You guys are sitting so far apart. It's like... Okay, so as you just heard, parents who want to educate their children at home will have many new responsibilities should this be passed. You're welcome to consult the National Department of Education. We thank Troy Martens and Joy Leavesley for taking their time out of their busy schedules to come and chat with us. When we return from the break, you'll meet a dad who's homeschooling his daughter because of her busy schedule. Imagine that. Let's chat. According to national numbers, about 57,000 children are being homeschooled in South Africa, with more than 80% of these children being black. Homeschooling gives my next guest the advantage of streamlining her daily commitments, which includes making time for presenting gigs as well as dedicating her time to some of her projects that include mentoring and coaching of young girls. We welcome YoTV presenter Katlego Ncala back for the third time, and this time she brought her dad along, Mr. Bongani Ncala. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.
Look, A, your dad looks like your brother. like when they say the dad, I'm like, hey man. Okay. And B, third time, first time you were here for Child Stars,
Yes.
then you were here for pageants.
Yes.
Now you're here for home education. Next time, maybe we'll be talking cooking and writing a book. Like at this point, you're not qualified to be here for everything.
I need like my own segment on the show.
You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm sure I can find you like a 10-minute slot weekly. All right, you and I will talk after this. So I want to talk about why you chose home education.
I mean, there was a lot of reasons, but by the time I got to grade 8, that was when I was like fully doing pageants now. Every single weekend I had big titles, I was going overseas, and then grade 9 came, which was 2015, and that was Miss Teen World. So now it was like I was doing a lot of things, and on top of that, I must say I didn't have the most pleasant experience, you know, at school.
Were you aware of this, Dad?
Yeah.
That it wasn't nice for her at school?
Yeah. So she made us aware because I think there was, you know, her becoming Miss Teen World.
Yeah.
It just caused a lot of challenges, you know, around her peers. And
What, so like jealousy and sniping?
yeah,
and,
sniping,
yeah.
you know, and it became like borderline
abusive.
bullying.
Yeah,
if we put it
yeah.
that
It's,
way.
no, it's abuse. Don't skirt
Yes,
around it.
Yeah. So, and we thought, you know what? I don't want my child to go through all of this. Let us look at alternatives. And I think so. Homeschooling, home education for us, you know, offered the flexibility of Katlego being able to work through the duties that she had during her year of reign, as well as removing her from all of this sniping and all of that. Yeah.
It's the strangest thing. Dineo Mwiketi, she was here as well, and she was bullied at school because her mom was famous. So I'm like, I want to hang out with those kids. It's like, I want my friend to be Miss Teen World. Like, do you understand the places we can go? Do you not think, though, Dad, that you are kind of... Because one day you're going to have to be in the workspace. And at work, there's also bullying there. Yes. One day you have to be an adult and your parents are not there. And in life, in general, there's also bullying there. Do you not think like you are hindering her from actually working through that so that ultimately she knows how to fight it so that it's done?
So I think maybe, you know, when Katlego came into the entertainment world, you know, also there's also bullying and there's also a whole lot of things. So she had to do a lot of growing up, which I think that was offered by the homeschooling process, because it was not only done, you know, through the education side of things, but she also had to have a certain type of responsibility, you know, in order for her to study on time, in order for her to be at work on time, in order for her to be able to fend off those people at work now. You know, that's because it's yes.
Ordinarily, you'd just be fending it off at
absolutely.
school, and now because you are a child and you're working in a public space, you're also having to put up with it from people you've never met who can just get hold of you on social media. And okay, I see. So, who comes up with the idea, Dad or you?
At first, it was me, and my parents were like, "What? What is that?" Like, you know, they were just like, okay. And they just sort of like brushed it off. But then I told them it was around October, you know? And then after that, a friend of my mom was busy telling her that, no, she's putting her child into homeschooling. And she was like, Kat actually spoke about this. So we actually look into it. And for them, it made so much sense. And then I got the forms, we registered, and yeah.
So there's a term called deschooling.
Deschooling?
Yes. So apparently when you're moving, I read up on this.
Yeah.
Apparently when you're moving from traditional education, which is the school, to homeschooling, there's a period where you must de-school for like 3 months, where you must do nothing, you mustn't touch books, you must do it. Okay, so tell me don't laugh at me.
I'm laughing because I'm like, I skipped out on that. I never did that.
Yeah, I want my de-schooling. Yeah. So what was the transition for you? What did you finish the year?
Yes, so I did. So I finished grade 9. And then I did, because before I do anything, you know, I love to like read about it to see if it's really what I actually want to do, you know? Especially because at school, I had like a lot of friends, and in my grade, people knew me. So Kat, homeschooling was a bit different. It was like, are you sure? But like, you're such a loud person and everything. So it was something like, are you sure? So I read about it, and I actually figured that if you do the Cambridge thing, you can actually do IG2, which is basically grade 11. So you don't have to do grade 10. So I said, so I can actually finish school before everyone else. Yeah. So, I mean, it was pretty cool. And I got my books and everything in January. I started from there. I didn't have a 3-month break, no, but I had my own breaks because I would travel, and then I'd say, okay, I traveled and it was like 7 days, so now I have to like have an extra 2 weeks of just like studying non-stop type of thing. So deschooling,
you just like,
I'm not so sure about that.
I've never heard about that. No. And in fact, I'd like to do it right now. So how who's at home? Because this is very like making someone do an MBA in standard 7. You know, like you have to have your own rules, and you look out for yourself, and if you don't work, then you don't get the results. True. How was that for you?
So, obviously we were guided by the Cambridge system. We then managed to get tutors who came in for different subjects. For Katlego. There was actually a time when she used to go to work with us, and she'd sit in an office, and tutors will come in and teach her while we were working. I
had my own office. I really felt cool. I felt so cool.
I'm like...
yeah. So we went through all of that, and then so this was wonderful, obviously, for Katlego, because then now she'd work at her own pace, which is something that was completely different from your traditional type kind of schooling.
Exactly.
And we realized that, you know, because she's working at her own pace, she can actually do more. You know, because I think if I may call it the system, it probably limits us or restricts us, because we need to move at the same pace as everyone else.
Exactly.
Yes, absolutely.
Right? Yeah.
So I think this, when we removed her and she was doing all this tutoring, home tutoring, then now we then realize that she can do French and finish an entire book. But Katlego has always been the driven. We've been lucky with Katlego, actually, comparing to my sisters. She's always been the driven one.
Other parents are looking at their kids going,
you know? So she's been the driven one, and she always knew what she always wanted, and she worked very hard, you know, in order for her to achieve whatever she wanted. So she just drove this entire process, and we were quite happy. And then we thought, well, let's try and do this IGC2, which is skipping an entire grade, or grade as it's known in our schooling system, and we moved on to grade 11, which is an equivalent of IGC2, which she drove the entire thing. We got very good results. in the end of the year, and then we moved on and did AS.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that is matric in South Africa, and then A level is basically your grade 13. So that's first year varsity.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. So you don't have to do that if you want to go to South African varsity. But if you want to go to like your Oxford, your Harvard, then you definitely need to actually do that. Yeah.
Okay, hold it right there. I still have so many questions. This is fascinating. More with Katlego and her dad when we return. And you're watching Real Talk, and we're chatting about home education. Yo TV presenter and Miss Teen World 2015, Katlego Ncala, has been a home scholar for about 2 years now, and she's here with her dad to share her experiences. But first, let's go for a quick voice note.
Hi, Anele. My name is Busi Selesho. I'm a mother of 4, and I homeschool them. The reason being is that I do a lot of traveling. So I'm a motivational speaker. I go around the world, and I do a lot of work outside my home, and sometimes I'm not at home. So homeschooling my kids helped me to feel safe that they are always at home. I don't have to Uber them around. I don't have to worry about their safety during and going to school and after school. Because, excuse me, my tutor comes through to my house to help them with their schooling. And if I need to travel with them, I can take them through because most of their work is online, so they don't have to be at one place at all times. So I can take them with when I travel, and I can just be at peace that I know where they are at all times.
So you're nodding there?
Yeah, I'm just like tick. I agree. I know that. Yeah.
Okay, but I mean, she's got 4 kids. You're 1.
I don't know about the 4th, Dad. If you would be able to cope with all 4 of us were actually homeschooled. But 1, I mean, it's pretty convenient.
Okay, so do you do the teaching?
No. We had a group of tutors
who come through. And do you mark? Who marks?
So there's a study center that Katlego goes to as well. So this is the part where, you know, you might say that, but my kid still needs to interact with other children. So we have a study center where these homeschool kids go to. So you have children that have got such... that are either doing sports or acting, so they're doing other things. I mean, like...
It's like an extramural activity.
And they literally motivated me so much because I only figured out this study center, I think it was around April. Yeah. And then I actually went there, and all these kids, they are horse riders, tennis players, and they work.
So it's a case of they are concentrating on the extramural side as much as they are in education.
Yes. So it was exactly the same with me. You know, I was focusing on presenting and pageants and business and everything, and then I got there and I'm like, okay, well, I still have school, and that's exactly what they actually say. I mean, we still have school, so we have to pass, but then there's something else that we can actually focus on.
So what's your route? Do you go to, when I say go to school, I mean, go from your room to the lounge? Like, do you go to school every day?
Well, it actually depended if my tutor was in, but I do go to this. Well, I did go to the study center every day because there's always an English tutor and a maths tutor there the entire day, and then sometimes others will actually come in. So I could just be doing something, and then I see my accounting tutor, and I'm like, well, actually, I need some help over here. But it's more of a library, I can say. So you aren't really, like, you don't have to go there. We don't have cycle tests. We don't have assembly. We don't have a register, you know.
You just go in and out as you please. And what are the discipline? Let's say I'm not going to the center, like you only discovered it in April. Prior to that, what were the discipline measures that you'd put in? Like, I must be up by 8, I must have had breakfast by 9, don't watch TV. And when is break time? I mean, at school, we wait for a bell. Like, when do you take break?
Well, I guess for me, that is why I actually told my parents that I want to go to the office to avoid the TV and the sleeping around at home. So the office is something more, you know, there isn't TV and everything like that. But I would work until I got tired, I guess. And for me, I would do 2 subjects a day. That's exactly how I would do it. I would literally do 2 weeks of accounting in a week. So then I know that, like, I'm finishing early, yeah.
And also because, as opposed to traditional schooling,
Yeah.
you know, you're in double maths and then the bell rings and you pack up
Exactly.
and you must move to the next class.
Yeah.
And that's quite time
And that's
consuming.
the amazing thing about like having tutors and everything. I mean, at school, what can you possibly learn in 45 minutes, you know? So I could tell my tutor, okay, we can do two hours or an hour and a half or anything like that. So it was just so convenient.
What are the costs that are involved? I mean, does it, because you were in Crawford,
Yes.
right? And Crawford is not exactly, you know, cheap. So what did you find? Did you find that you were paying more for traditional?
They saved us an entire year of fees, of tuition fees.
But that's because she skipped a year.
Yeah. So, I mean, already there was a
then.
huge saving on our side, you know, and the tutors obviously come and you know, you work with them on their rate per hour or so. Most of the work she does herself. So they come only for assessments
Yes.
purposes, and we are also linked to the British International College, which is where Katlego goes to do her assessments.
Exams, yeah.
Exams, rather.
Okay.
So she goes there to do her exams, and that's the affiliation, I think, where your previous speaker were talking about earlier on. So that's the formal side of things that we've had or engaged with. Yeah.
It sounds like you didn't struggle with anything, but was there like an adjustment? Like,
There was a huge adjustment.
Yeah.
what
Like,
was it?
from, you know, Crawford and friends and everything.
And doesn't Crawford like have a coffee shop on campus? Hey.
Well, the touch up is a Nino's, but...
That is a coffee shop. I don't care what you say. We were out there eating stale hot dogs and flavored milk, okay?
And just to going, like, being by yourself. So it was, I mean, for the first few months, I must say, it was a bit boring, but I was just helped by the fact that I had other things going on and actually was traveling. But, you know, I would, like, speak to my friends, and they'd be like, so-and-so happened today, and I'm just like, well, I don't really know. But, yeah, so, I mean, once I got to the study center, there was so much that I actually identified with the other people, you know, studying on planes and everything. So it was just, like, pretty chilled. But the one thing about homeschooling, the one tricky thing that people don't know, you can chill the whole year, but the time the exam comes, because you don't have cycle tests to keep up your progress to see
where you are.
So if you decide that you're gonna chill and August now you'll be fine, you'll study, it's gonna get you.
And because, I mean, you know, when you were at school and your teachers, like, you know, giving you tips on the exam, okay?
Yes.
Don't you miss that?
You know, I was actually telling my parents that the other day, especially for my exam. I literally went to the teacher at the actual campus, and I said, "Sir, just tell me what page not to study, you know, something." And our business book was like this thick, and he's like, "I really don't know. Just study everything." So we don't get any guidelines whatsoever. Literally, when they say study everything, they mean study everything.
And you in matric now?
Yes. Just
What are you gonna do next year?
Bachelor in Science Accounting.
Where?
At Wits or Tax, so between those two.
And I mean, ultimately, you have to now deal with people all the time.
Yes.
Are you cool? You ready for that?
I think I'm cool. I mean, it's not really such a big issue.
Because outside of the people, I think homeschooling is more a varsity-based, like the fact that you go to the library by yourself and you deal with tutors, which are lecturers by yourself. Outside of that, I'm just worried about the people part.
You know, I think because I started homeschooling at the age of 16, I'm pretty set. You know, it's not like I started at the age of 7 and now I'm gonna have a problem with, like, dealing with people. Like, I know that by now. I mean, it was just 2 years out of school and I'm gonna go back to varsity.
No, people, why are they walking? Where are they going? Help!
People.
Get me out of here. Bongani, thank you for your time.
Thank you so
Kat,
much.
thank you for your time. Really, you've enlightened me. Like I said, I was like, you know, for me, homeschool was like, you know those kids that are quiet and they're eating their own hair. That's what I thought, and now she's changed it. Thank you so much to Katlego and her dad, Bongani Ncala. They shared their experiences with us. When we come back from the break, you'll meet another mom who's homeschooling 3 of her children and her nephew. Come back. So... From overcrowded classrooms to ruthless bullies, some children stand a better chance of thriving when their education takes place at home. Home education has its benefits for parents and children, and more families believe that the advantages far outweigh the traditional school attendance. With me now is another homeschooling mom who's made the decision to homeschool her children. I think I got my wires crossed. I said she's got 4, 3 at home, 1. You know, there's lots of it. Either way, her name is Rebekka Liebenberg, and she'll explain to me where I got my wires crossed. So what were you saying? I said you're homeschooling 4, and you're saying no, you're homeschooling 1.
I've only got 1 at home now, yeah.
When you say now, so
Yes.
they were homeschooled?
I did homeschool all my children for quite some time. We started in 2008, so it's 10 years in, I could say. When we started, it was just myself and 3 of my children who were homeschooling or doing some sort of education, because my little one was only a year old.
Okay.
And we really loved it. It worked very well for us for a long time. And then there was a period during that time where I homeschooled my nephew as well. And then at some point we decided to put the 2 older ones back into school.
Why?
Many reasons. One of them being that we had someone in the family that got very ill, and I became the caregiver. So I couldn't physically cope with the pressure, and they had just got to the point when they were ready to do their last phase, the high school years, and it is very content-based. It's a lot of work that they have to get through, and teenagers aren't easy. They needed the many teachers and the strict discipline.
What was your reasoning for home education in the first place?
There are so many. I'd say the main one was I was dissatisfied with the quality of education that my children were getting at school. When they started schooling, they immediately in the first year regressed in terms of their language ability. They're really smart kids. I believe all kids are gifted, and that given the right environment and enough attention and the correct kind of stimulation, every child will thrive and do something really good for themselves. They're just all very different. So it's very difficult in a big classroom for one teacher to, with a brand new dynamic, not knowing the children, she would only meet them the beginning of that year. It's difficult for her to get to know those children on such a level that they would understand.
And know their strengths and their weaknesses.
Yes.
And so are you qualified? Are you a teacher? So besides the language, how could you tell that you were not happy with the level of education?
Well, I did go to university and I studied English and fine arts. I did a bit of law. I had French as one of my subjects. So I'm not qualified, no, but I'm educated, and I think anybody can become educated through a lot of reading. I mean, we're living in an information age. There isn't actually such a thing anymore as distinguishing between qualifications. There is a very big move, especially in the tertiary education world, where degreed people and qualified in terms of paper is making less and less sense now, and they are moving towards having people quantify their experience, because worldwide experience, if somebody travels a lot, like the young girl you had who you know is homeschooling but is in the public eye, that is an experience not many people have, and it matures you and prepares you in a way that normal people don't experience, because it's unusual.
And what did you find when your kids went back? Did they struggle to integrate themselves?
Not at all.
Okay.
In fact, when we put them back in, it was a smallish school, private, but they were growing very quickly. Cambridge based, they were certified by Cambridge, because all their stuff is marked by the Cambridge University. It's not marked by any South African institution. The teachers really liked them a lot, and they were so blown away by the kids. They said, no, these kids are going to get first in South Africa for everything, which I didn't. It was a very big shock for me to hear stuff like it, because you know, you don't, if we haven't done the kind of testing where one can analyze that sort of thing, it's not something you expect to hear. But they did do very well. They did exceptionally well. They integrated with the subjects very well. They loved their teachers. They loved the friends. It wasn't a very big change in terms of education. I think the change was, for us, mainly the routine, because it meant you couldn't get up at 9 or 10 o'clock in the morning anymore.
I was about to ask you, what routine were you putting in place? Because also, you know, it wasn't just the luxury of one child. So what were you doing? Did they all have to be in one place at the same time? Would they all break at the same time?
Initially, I did do that when they were young. We did have a very strict routine where we all got up. We started late. I didn't start early. We started around about 9 o'clock. No, I'm not a morning person, so it suited me. You have to find the dynamic that works well for yourself as well as your children, because there's a huge burden on your shoulders. There's a lot to do. So if you stress yourself out too much, you can't function optimally, and then you can't give what you know they would need. I did not use tutors initially. We did start with 1 or 2 teachers from the school, thinking that we needed it, but we learned very quickly that that was actually more of an interruption of our dynamic than anything else. And we only really reintroduced tutors later on when they started doing IGCSE, when they were doing, which is, it's the Cambridge system. You get IGCSE, then AS, and then A2. IGCSE is the,
Katlego mentioned all of that.
IGCSE 2 is not really a recognised qualification except in South Africa. South Africans have divided the IGCSE year into 2 parts because it's a big load. It's actually grade 10 and 11. In other countries, they do it in 1 year. We must remember children in many countries start as young as 3 at school. And by the time they're finishing school, they've been in school for 14, 13 years. When my children started school, the laws at that time prohibited me from putting my children into school too young an age. So my kids had to be 7, which I just didn't agree with at the time. I felt it was too late. My kids were ready for school earlier, but I had no choice about that. I can't force the school to take my kids. So the older 2 were about a year or so behind in terms of where they wanted to be because of that. But then the laws changed again, and then, but by that time, we decided not to go the route anyway.
What must happen in the house for it to be a conducive environment for education? Like, must there be, you know, no TV in that room?
Absolutely.
Do you have to be sitting at a desk? What are the...
I think what we need to do is really make a distinction about what we define as education and as what is conducive, because children are also different. So I'm just going to speak from my experience and my children, because I hear a lot from other people, but it's easier to talk from what you've seen. My eldest child is very driven and she likes routine. She's extremely strict. She likes a certain time with a certain book. She would go so far as to do a certain subject in a certain room, because that's the science space where she can zone in on that. I have another one who would lie on the trampoline with music in his ears and reading Plato, because that is what he likes to do. The other one, not so keen on school, so we have to sort of...
edge them along?
It's like feeding a child who doesn't want to eat their vegetables. You mush it up and you stick it into everything you can find, even ice cream if you have to, so that you hide it. And because children are so different and they each need something different, by the time they're about 12, you very quickly pick up those differences. It's sort of, in the beginning, there isn't much distinction because they're doing the basic stuff, learning the alphabet, learning how to actually put the words together, understanding what the meaning of those words are, what is context and how does it work in terms of what I'm reading. So until they're about 12, I did not impose a routine, because I don't agree with it. I don't like the very strict assessing regimen that most curriculums and things have. I think it's age inappropriate. I have done a fair amount of reading about it, so you know, I doubt myself a lot, so I read a lot, and I like to read on both sides, just in case I'm wrong.
Arguments as well,
and one learns that way, because you can't be right about everything, and things change. So what I would do with my kids between the age of 5 and 12, and what I would do between the age of 12 and 14 are worlds apart.
So when you said you read especially opposing views, what was the most interesting you read from the other side?
What I keep finding is the other side does not understand the psyche of children. The education system as we know it is very old.
True.
It is archaic, quite frankly, and I think we have not kept up with the times. Children are really clever, and they are extremely competent to actually choose for themselves, and as adults we really need to give them more authority in their own lives, as well as more confidence to know that what they choose for themselves does actually make sense, even if it's not what the world is doing.
Okay, after the break, we'll look at the pros and the cons of homeschooling. Actually, we just started that now. But what also we're going to have a look at is the psychological impact. We'll have a clinical psychologist joining us. Come back. You're tuning into Real Talk, and we're talking DIY education, do-it-yourself education. If you are considering homeschooling your children, you should consider the psychological effects on the kids. And joining myself and Rebekka is clinical psychologist Hayden Nibbs. But before we get to him, we've got another voice note from you.
Hi, Anele. My name is Leabenberg, and I'm a homeschooling mother of 4 girls, aged between 12 and 4 years old, and I'm also homeschooling, or rather unschooling, my brother's daughter, who is 4 years old. I first took my children to private schooling like most parents because I thought that they would receive the best education that would equip them in life. However, I soon started to deal with issues of bullying that are prevalent in schools and from other children as well as from teachers. For instance, we once had to deal with a teacher that wanted to insist her personal views of beauty on my child. She was white and we are black. So traditionally, schooling is singular in its view of the world, or dare I say that it's Eurocentric. So I wanted to give my children a more Afrocentric view of things.
Okay, Hayden, we're going to come to you, but just that she was nodding so much during that voice note that I feel like, why are you nodding so much?
She said so many things that I have experienced some of them and that I keep hearing from other homeschooling parents.
Yeah.
Going to school means you have to conform. School takes the point of view that you are an average child. Education is established for the average child. If you consider what children are, there is no such thing. What they're catering for doesn't exist. So you have a huge amount of children all trying to be something that's average, which is not what anybody really is. There is such a little bit of individuality in a very contrived situation where you have forced association with the same 30 kids for however many years, and each year you get a new teacher. The scope of growth is actually smaller. Which is why extramurals are so important.
Okay, so Hayden, let's talk about the psychological effects now.
Yes.
Should there be like a test or a few sessions before you move your child from traditional schooling into homeschooling and vice versa?
Difficult to answer. I wouldn't say that that's necessarily the most effective route. It's difficult to say as a blanket statement what would fit best. That is because each individual case I, as a clinician, would view in its own individual merits. So in certain instances, for whatever reasons, there's probably a plethora of different reasons why an individual would consider homeschooling. But in certain instances, they would probably hold more weight, and it would be to the advantage of the individual situation. In other cases, for whatever reasons, it will probably hold more weight to be in a more traditional type schooling environment. Here we saw an example of both at different phases that benefited. So theoretically, a more flexible approach is more likely to hit the target, if we can call it that.
Is that why you like your idea of thinking this, because there's a flexibility? Sometimes they're in traditional school and sometimes they're at home, and you find that you're getting, you know, the optimum results from that.
I think you only get the optimum results because you're catering for what the child needs. That's what the flexibility is about. If a child is struggling with something, for instance, in our country we see a tremendous problem with mathematical ability. And almost all children at some point have this problem. My own children didn't suffer with that problem, but one of my children did struggle a bit. So she would do maths on one grade, but her other subjects would be on another grade. So you don't have to do one grade at one time.
Okay, so earlier I spoke to Katlego about deschooling, and then she was like, I don't know what you're talking about. Do you understand? Hayden, you've heard of deschooling?
I've heard of the concept.
Yeah.
I'm not... Well, if I can speak about it clinically speaking, what the value that it would give essentially would be swapping over contexts and redefining norms. That's how we would term it clinically. So essentially what you would be doing is whatever was normed in a child for learning, and also the act of swapping contexts. So changing contexts is when we change context throughout our lives. But if we are mixing contexts, we run the risk of not gaining everything from it. So my thinking is that the logic behind this practice is to try and solidify the change over in context. Theoretically, it wouldn't be necessary, let's say, because it will probably benefit some and not all require as much time to swap over context. That's what you're likely to find. But I understand the logic behind it, and I suppose as a shotgun approach, it's not going to do harm unless it prolongs time that you would, you know, if you're taking 3 months, obviously you're losing 3 months.
Yes.
But if you're weighing up the pros and cons, then I suppose that is your choice.
And if you're weighing up the fact that there is no time wasting when you're homeschooling. So yes, and theoretically you're 3 months behind because you took time
academically, of the syllabus.
Yes, but I mean, if you then, like you're saying, you're optimizing all your time and you can study on Saturdays and study on Sundays, then
or do night schooling. We've done that as well.
Okay. Do they have to dress a certain way?
No. Sometimes we did school in pajamas or in our swimming costume or in the ballet outfit or the taekwondo outfit or whatever's going to happen next. You don't need a uniform to engage your brain.
He made some good points here about the deschooling. Did you find that the deschooling was good for some of your kids, but for the other ones it wasn't even necessary?
Exactly what he said in theory, I've actually found in practice, because I did that with my children.
Yeah.
The theory is that you deschool for each year that your child's been in school, you deschool for 1 month. Yes, so that's what they say. I don't think it's the same for everybody. I did that with my kids, and my eldest, the one who's so driven, after 6 months, she said she's going crazy. Please, for goodness sake, get her some books. She wants to study. Great, and we went for it. And I found that the children could catch up in 6 months, a whole year to 2 years worth of schoolwork.
Yeah.
Which was
in the
incredible.
6 months, she does nothing.
We read books, we swam, we chilled, we discussed things that happened at school. You must remember that children take a long time to process anything. So in the changeover from school to homeschooling, one of the big things that they did lose was the stress, because it was a tremendous amount of stress. You know, just getting in the car, the traffic, the jams, the hustle and bustle in the morning, and it's a lot of stress. Everybody experiences it, and it's normal. But for little children, they battle to assimilate that because it's actually not a natural state that people should be in. And as Africans, we know that. We don't like it. So that wonderful period where they could de-stress from that, it was actually quite quick. They loved it, and once they realized, you know, I'm okay and I got this, they went for it.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. Hayden, anything you want to add before we say goodbye?
I think one thing that's not really touched in the potential pitfalls or challenges rather that homeschooling will face. Because huge advantage is the flexibility and the individuality of the system of homeschooling. You're teaching an individual rather than a classroom and a group. However, depending on how you manage it, and what I'm about to say can be managed, but it is a potential issues to manage.
Yeah, and also it's like saying, oh, you know, you don't have to deal with the hustle of the bustle, but when you're 30 years old and you're working in an office environment, you will have to deal with it.
Precisely. So there's elements of the context, the environment of the world that you're not being prepared for, potentially. You run the risk of limiting exposure to diversity, because that is the context you will function in outside, unless you cater for it. But depending on how homeschooling is addressed, if these things are not understood and catered for, you also have things like a schooling system has some rigid limitations that can be very frustrating, but then you build frustration tolerance. You also will function, let's say you sculpt a homeschooling environment that is interactionally very effective. So you teach the children how to interact optimally. That is very advantageous, but you also limit or you don't yet teach them, unless you cater for it, their knowledge of how to interact in ineffective interactions, which is the world. We cannot pretend that it doesn't exist. It needs to be catered for. It is part of the learning process. So I'm not saying whether one is correct or not, but rather it is to consider these elements, these clinical elements, and cater for them.
Take bits and pieces of everything and put it together. I hear you. Like my line is, I hear what you're saying, unless you cater for it at all times.
Indeed. Okay. There is even more, the role definition.
We have to go.
Okay, sorry.
Sorry, maybe you should come for longer next time. Sorry, Hayden, but like totally hear you. We're out of time, sorry. Look, and Hayden was rhyming, hey? Hayden was rhyming. Obviously, I hope you've gathered as much information as you can before you can make a decision on whether or not your child is going to be educated at home. For myself and the rest of the team, have a good evening.